the deep range, and into the light of the deep strange. Cometh the hour, cometh the mothership that is Ark Midnight. Greetings to the Ark Riders. We got a good show lined up for you tonight. 3 hours worth. You know, I was thinking again. Oh boy, the thoughts were spiraling upwards, and I thought of something that Warwicker said. The purpose of intelligence is to find out the truth, not to confirm what we already believe, to see what's really there, not what we want to see there. You know him, and he knows his stuff. He is Ray McGovern, and we're going to talk to him here in a little bit. It's going to be pretty good. Gosh, there's a lot of stuff going on. Look, Assange just got cleared of the rape charges. Sweden dropped him. We all knew it was bogus anyway, didn't we? I mean, didn't we? Yes. Leaks. The whole DC ship is leaking. CIA and Chinese assets. That's ugly. And how about that thing that happened day before yesterday in Times Square? Very, very strange indeed. Well, I am John B. Wells, and Tuesday through Friday I am privileged to host Caravan to Midnight, which can be found at caravantomidnight.com. Let me just say this at the beginning of the program. Our Facebook page is John B. Wells, and you can follow me on Twitter at John B. Wells CTM. That's Caravan to Midnight. You can say Charlie Tango Mike if you like, but it's still CTM, John B. Wells CTM on Twitter. And it's amazing the programs that we are able to produce because the Caravanners make it possible. They enable it all. They really do. It is a membership service, and therefore, while others claim they are free from corporate influence, we actually are. Free from mainstream media constraints. Well, we really are. We really are, and it's the best job that anybody could ever hope for. Just yesterday, we spoke with Catherine Austin Fitz. She was a part of the state as a state government. I mean, state with all caps. And it's amazing how she is all about the lubricant for the machinery of states, cities, households, global cabals. It's all about the money. We all know the expression, follow the money. Money's getting pretty tough to track. But if you do follow it, you're liable to wind up visiting some very, very interesting places. She and a young man named Josh Kaplan with a C. He is the author and owner of VesselNews.io. I put it in wrong the first time. I put .oi, which is oi. I don't think he had oi in mind at all. But it's a fantastic news site. He's a very sharp cat, and you ask him questions about anything that's going on. Boom, boom, boom. Here come the answers. We also spoke with Kevin Massengill, former U.S. Army Airborne Ranger, now the founder and CEO of Merigleam Holdings, covering topics from where these classified leaks are coming from in the Middle East, and just everything you could possibly want to get out of a guy who's been around the block more than once. In fact, he's been around the whole town several times. And then Larry Nichols came on. He was deep inside the Clinton apparatus. And his book, 28 Years to Nowhere, is quite an eye-opener. And Greg Hunter from USA Watchdog was on for a while, too. Wow. What a machine gun, a Gatling gun. One of the new ones, like a Minimi, one of those things they put on the C-130 Hercules. It's that kind of information comes out of Greg Hunter. Ole Damagard, so many more. So I'm suggesting maybe you'd like to become a member of Caravan to Midnight. Episode 740 4 is an archive waiting for you. I'll give you details later. But let's get through our break and go over a few things that you may find interesting, and then bring on Mr. Ray McGovern, ex-CIA analyst, and now truth activist. Stand by.
It's not a programming glitch, nor some science you don't understand. It's Ark Midnight with John B. Wells.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, you want to hear a little bit of this stuff? It's pretty weird. Yes, via Reuters, Mexican mob attacks Russian man in Cancun over insults. Oh, what did he say? Suka? Something? What could he have said? They say it all the time. They don't say Suka. They say something else, but it sounds just like Suka. A mob of angry Mexicans attacked a Russian man in the Caribbean resort of Cancun with sticks and rocks over his repeated insults against locals. And the 42-year-old man was accused of fatally stabbing a youth in the melee, authorities said on Saturday. Oh, brother. Police rescued the Russian, identified as Alexei Makeyev, after the crowd stormed his apartment on Friday night. Wow, said Guillermo Brahms, Secretary General of Benito Juarez Municipality, which encompasses Cancun. Wow. He must have really popped off pretty seriously. It's terrible. Terrible, terrible. Colorado governor. Oh, this is an AP story. Colorado governor on Friday pardoned a Cuban immigrant for an armed robbery he committed 19 years ago in an effort to stave off the man's deportation after immigration authorities detained him following a judge's ruling that he should no longer be imprisoned. He was going around with an accomplice robbing blockbusters. Winds up inside and all of this, but at the end of the day, while it makes an infuriating story to some, how dare this governor of Colorado free this felon? He belongs in jail. Well, he's going to get deported anyway, because I'm thinking that what the governor has to say about this is not going to affect federal law very much. And it is interesting to note that, wow, Mr. Trump is in some deep stuff, is he not? However, immigration arrests are up 38% nationwide. Dozens of MS-13 gang members have been arrested in 50 raids in Los Angeles. Now, this is kind of rough. You remember Lieutenant General Michael Flynn? Well, the source is Miami Herald by Vera Bergengruen. One of the Trump administration's first decisions about the fight against the Islamic State was made by General Michael Flynn weeks before he was fired, and it conformed to the wishes of Turkey, whose interests, unbeknownst to anyone in Washington, he'd been paid more than $500,000 to represent. Now, the question is this true? Have you noticed recently there's been a lot of, an unnamed source, a White House official, a White House worker bee, under the condition of anonymity, said that, and whatever it is, how is it possible to get so much hearsay into the public domain? It is a little worrying because, well, it could happen to any of us, couldn't it? Absolutely it could. I wish there was some way. Maybe we're doing it now and it just doesn't feel like it's happening fast enough. I suspect that's the case, but I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could restore some ethics just a little bit? Well, at least Mr. Trump is now over there in the land of the Saudis. It's in Saudi Arabia. $350 billion arms accord. Going to sell them $350 billion worth of stuff over the next 10 years. $110 billion kicked off the deal. That's the we're serious money. So there you go. And he didn't bow. Unlike our last president, he did not bow to the Saudi king, which I think is to his credit. So now there's something else. I want to go over this with Mr. McGovern here when we bring him on here in a little bit. What do you make of that? What do you make of that car attack in New York City? You know, at first, the cops have got him, right? And they say, he's just drunk. Well, he blew a zero according to the reports that came out about him. So what does this really mean? And if you, I don't know, have you seen any of the footage? Well, some dedicated caravanners and a very designated Olas, the man, took a look at this thing, and I took a look at it. And you know, I got to tell you, there is a bunch of really weird stuff going on. There are various, sidewalk cameras. You got one out in front of Chase. I think there's one out in front of a drugstore, Walgreens maybe, and this one and that one. And so you can see this from different angles. But I'm wondering who collected these snippets of video record. Who did that? We just walked in and said, "Hey, let me see your surveillance camera footage. Do you mind if I take this? Can I copy this?" But it's very, very interesting. Now, here's something else. By way of throwing some stuff up on the wall and see if some of it sticks. Unfortunately, it's pretty much all sticking. We spoke with Ole. I call him Ole, but he's from Sweden, so it might be Ole, but I call him Ole Damagard. And a very bright man who is way out on the clothesline with his investigations. And he mentioned a company that we took a look at. Crisis-Solutions.com is their website. If you feel like it, while you're listening to the program, take a look at this. It's very, very interesting. But for caravanners to be, if you go to last week's programs and you look at the one with me and Ole Damagard, and you watch this thing, your mind is going to be completely rearranged and readjusted. I'll give you a hint. Crisis-Solutions. Crisis Solutions. The clue is in the name. Now, what clue could they be alluding to? Is there something in solutions? What, UT, University of Texas? No, that's not it. What could it be? SISIL? I know. CRISIS. Is that the clue? The clue is in the name. This is creepy. Now what I'm trying to provide to you right now is a little dose of Caravan to Midnight light, because these are the terrestrial airwaves, and there's no way to know who is listening. What offices they go to in the morning, who they play golf with, who they sit around after hours to have a drink with, and who are sitting around, who may be sitting around at a club that we know nothing about, and we'll never know anything about it. Bunch of experienced, semi-weathered, and yet somehow well-heeled older men sit around this club in their leather chairs, and nobody's talking. They're just minding their own business, like something you'd see out of a production made in the UK. We just all go to the club and be quiet. We don't go there to socialize. We go there to become social minimalists, which is an increasingly better idea as time goes by. I just wonder, how much can we say over the air? We'll find out when we talk to Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern, on his website here, it says, spreading a little truth around. Some of the stories on his website are very interesting. From today, for example, no, you may not, is the answer. May, it's Theresa May expect to hear from her American puppet masters. Would she be so bold as to ask whether she may let Julian Assange go, even though Sweden has dropped the trumped up, no pun intended, rape allegations? The answer she can await will be a firm no. You must hold him prisoner. We must continue to make an example of him. So, well, let's have a little more. One might entertain the fleeting thought that after the groveling of former British PM Tony Blair toward his partner in, may we say, war crime, George W. Bush, Theresa may take a different decision. But really, would she defy an order from her senior partner, Washington, to keep Julian Assange cooped up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London? Not likely. Those Americans can be nasty. But what about UN findings that depriving Julian Assange of his freedom amounts to arbitrary detention? What about the opprobrium once attached to seeming to be an international pariah, not to mention an obsequious satrap of empire, ever bowing to its dictates? Well, no matter, the UK may go on thumbing its nose at international law as long as Washington keeps providing the Kleenex. It's a special relationship, you see, and the British are past masters at arbitrary detention in any case. The Magna Carta is still the curriculum, but it appears that habeas corpus is no longer translated into English or into action. Now, that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see on Ray McGovern's websites, raymcgovern.com. Let's see, what else? What else might you find interesting? Oh, how about this one? Regarding Robert Mueller, universally respected deep state thug. Wow. Now, that's pretty strong. Not as strong as what Anderson Cooper said when he was talking to somebody that was not in agreement with Anderson's political affiliation or orientation. Special counsel investigating Trump campaign has deep ties to the deep state. Former FBI Special Agent and Division Counsel Colleen Rowley, 17 May, goes like this. She knows Mueller well enough, so she gave this interview yesterday to the Real News Network. And there's a link here that'll take you right to it. So former FBI agent and 9/11 whistleblower Colleen Rowley says former FBI head Robert Mueller, now appointed to investigate the Trump campaign's ties to Russia, and maybe even the Russia WikiLeaks, participated in covering up the pre-9/11 role of the U.S. intelligence agencies and the Bush administration, helped create the post-9/11 national security surveillance state, and helped facilitate the pre-Iraq war propaganda machine. So this is some of the stuff she said. Robert Mueller had only been director for a few days when 9/11 occurred, so he really didn't have any responsibility for that, but he was also in charge when this kind of cover-up occurred, where they really weren't telling the truth. The FBI and all the other officials claimed that there were no clues, that they had no warning, etc. That's not the case. There had been all kinds of memos and intelligence coming in. I actually had a chance to meet Director Mueller personally the night before I testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he was more or less. There was another agent in Phoenix who he had done the same with trying to get us on his side, on the FBI side, so that we wouldn't say anything terribly embarrassing. And he told me that if I ever witnessed anything like that again, the pre-9/11 failures, that I should call him directly. I should get in touch with him. So this is the problem. The problem is that, as Catherine Austin Fitts so eloquently put it, when I said, so the government has become like a crime syndicate. And she said, no, not just that, but the citizens have become part of the crime syndicate as well. And I suppose that makes sense. It does make sense if you hear all of her conversation. We were on there for 2 solid hours, commercial-free, I might add, and because that's the way we roll at Caravan to Midnight. But by the time it's all over with, you realize that is why so many people are so obsessed with getting Donald Trump out of the White House. He is not an insider. Not at all. And you know how it was when we were in school. If you're not a member of the club, then you're not a member of the club. and people will go through all kinds of shenanigans to try and get you out. Back in those days, they just beat you up. But they have a different way of beating people up now, don't they? All right. Well, rogue agent scandal clouds efforts to expand border patrol. China cripples USA spying by killing or imprisoning and then killing CIA informants. I told the crew, and I tell every crew member that comes on board with Caravan to Midnight, which you can find once again at caravantomidnight.com. Check it out during the break while you're listening to our sponsors. You may not think that you're in a spy movie, but actually you are. You really are. All right. Thanks very much for being with us tonight. We're going to carry on toward the midnight hour here in the Central Time Zone. That whole midnight thing, no matter where you are in the world, it's almost midnight. Stand by.
An arc of rational thought traveling through the void of vacuous content and opinion. Ark Midnight with John B. Wells. Once again, here is John B.
All right. A fitting tribute to Chris Cornell, Audio Slave, and Temple of the Dog. Yeah. I don't have any Temple of the Dog records. I don't, but you know, they only put out one anyway, right? So, but look, that's spy music. Spy music for a CIA guy. Let me tell you a little bit about Ray McGovern, in case you don't know who he is. Many people do, but in case you don't. He was born in the Bronx, New York City, grew up there, got a degree from Fordham University with honors, then served in the U.S. Army from 62 to 64. Okay? Then he was a CIA analyst for 27 years, count them, 1963 to 1990, routinely presenting the morning intelligence briefings at the White House. His CIA career began under President John F. Kennedy and lasted until the president of George H.W. Bush then. Ray McGovern chaired National Intelligence Estimates and prepared the president's daily brief. And in the mid-1980s, he was a senior analyst conducting early morning briefings one-on-one with the Vice President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the Assistant to the President for National Security. At his retirement in 1990, Ray McGovern received the CIA's Intelligence Commendation Medal. He worked as an officer for the CIA, where he was responsible for the analysis of Soviet policy in Vietnam. Well, he's a veteran CIA officer, and he's turned to a political activism. And I like talking to him. I think you're going to like listening to him. So why don't we? Ray, welcome back. Good to have you with us again on Ark Midnight.
Thank you, John B.
Wow, what a career. Did you like it, spy music?
Love it.
You know what? There's so much swirling around, you know, and people, you know, I think that people can only put up with so much of it because so much of it is all the same. You know, I don't know if you heard me talking earlier before you came on, but it's like an unidentified source said, someone inside said, they never say allege. You know, if somebody bludgeons somebody to death out in the middle of the street, then the alleged murderer, even though they got him there, the cops watched him, the crowd did too, and the cameras caught him, but it's still Mr. So-and-so and the alleged, right? But when it comes to a president that is wildly unpopular among the progressive left, well, let's just call it like it is, the Marxist left. They don't even know they're Marxists. That's the problem. No holds barred. Just let them have it, whatever. And I'm just wondering, what do you make of all this leaking? How can this quality, if I may call it such, be leaked exactly? Isn't it more like taken from within a secured location and then released? Because a leak suggests that, somebody said something and, you know, it just kind of got out there into the public domain. I think these are deliberate attempts to create problems for this administration.
Well, I agree, John B. It's a pretty sorry state of affairs. I've never seen it quite this bad, and I've been around here in Washington for 55 years. There are leaks, and then there are leaks. Now, what we're seeing lately are people, members of what we call the deep state. And I'm talking about the FBI, the CIA, NSA, and this umbrella organization, the Director of National Intelligence. They're out to do Trump in. They don't like him. He's not really under their control just yet. And besides, he wants to do something that's very, very dangerous for their purposes. You see, peace is a really bad idea if you want to make money out of manufacturing arms and selling arms. I remember when Pope Francis was here a year and a half ago, testified, or he spoke before Congress, and he said, the problem boils down to the blood-drenched arms traders. Whoa, the blood-drenched arms traders. Mm-hmm. And, of course, all the congressmen and senators, they stood up and they applauded. And if you watch carefully, they looked into their jacket pockets to make sure their last check from Lockheed or from Raytheon or the other arms merchants was still there. It's a terribly corrupt business. And the media companies, the 6 largest mega corporations, are all controlled by corporations that are profiteering on wars. So here comes Trump. Now, I don't hold any brief for Trump myself, but I do like what he said in the beginning, which was, there's no reason for us not to have a decent relationship with the Russians. I'm going to do all I can, said Trump, to create a détente there, a workable relationship where we don't have to spend so much money or we don't have to fear each other so badly. Now, that was anathema. That was anathema to the people who make and who sell these arms. Now, witness today, we have the news out of Saudi Arabia that the U.S. government is going to sell $110 billion. Now, that's billion with a B as in boy, dollars worth of arms to Saudi Arabia. Now, who makes that money? Well, the people who sell the arms, the Raytheons, the Lockheeds, all the defense industries. And, what happens to that money? Well, Saudis have money galore, so what happens to the money that's earned? Well, some of that goes into the coffers of representatives and senators. They use it to get reelected. They get reelected, then they appropriate more money for arms manufacture and arms trading, and the arms deals go through, and part of the profits go to the representatives and the senators, and they use it for their campaign. They get reelected. They appropriate. Hello, is this a great country or what, John B?
Yeah, it's a great gig if you can get it working up there in D.C. on that level, yeah. So let me ask you this. Yeah. Now, I know you don't work political campaigns, but I suspect you know a lot more than you're ever going to let us know. But I've wondered, how is it people go to Congress and they go up there dirt poor, and by the time it's all over with, if they leave at all, other than, by checking out of the planet, they're multimillionaires. So when these political contributions come in, I mean, is all of the money supposed to be used in furtherance of reelection, or do you get to use it for whatever you want?
Well, with the unlimited contributions that corporations posing as people can now give, it's really an unbounded oasis of money that these people can draw on, whether they're dirt poor, which I dare say is the exception. If we're talking about Congress, they may start out that way, but very, very quickly they become corrupted. And, they give the excuse, well, you have to raise millions and millions and millions of dollars to stay in office. And that happens to be true. But then there are what I would call the hoi aristoi, the upper crust, the people who come out of the Ivy Leagues and know better than us what's good for the country. And they get ensconced in these high policy-making positions. They get into this bubble where they talk to each other, but don't have any idea what's going on in the rest of the country, and are willing to make policies and do things like encourage the arms industries and neglect the poor, neglect the orphan and the widow and the alien that the scripture that I follow tells us to be concerned about first and foremost. So it is kind of a caste system that we have now. The tax laws allow it, and the system encourages this kind of thing. And as you know, the gap between the very, very rich and the poor has become increasingly large, for the last 30, 40 years.
So I'm wondering, what is it that they are most afraid of? And this may be a little early. We can work into this slower. We can just go blah, 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 and just get it on. And I'm just wondering, what is the deep state so worried about? Now granted, President Trump is something less than delicate in some of the things that he says. In fact, in a lot of the things that he says. But some of the stuff that he says is absolutely brilliant. And I mean, he's so far, he's done pretty much what he said he was going to do. Now, I looked at a map. I didn't have to, but I did, and I thought, border wall, huh? Wow, that's going to be a long wall, isn't it? And then I thought, if people can tunnel under anything, tunnel under the border, and the tunnels are like a mile long, and they've done this before, well, what makes anybody think that a wall's going to stop them? So I was like, all right, let's set that aside for a minute. But arrests are up. Illegal immigration is down, making money, making deals, people willing to invest all this. Stock market went crazy, went up over 20,000, went over 21. And then, because it's such an emotional roller coaster, the moment that things started to get deep, special counsel, this could be bad. There could be collusion between Trump and the Russia WikiLeaks, and there is no Russia WikiLeaks, in my opinion, but I'll get with you on that here in a second. Now, all of a sudden, the stock market took a 300-something point tumble. So I'm just wondering, what is their real problem with him, Ray? Do they just not like him? Is it a personal thing, or is he a threat?
Well, he's a threat to their very raison d'etre. They want to make lots more money, and they do a lot of that through arms sales. And it looks like he's bowed, or at least Tillerson has bowed, to the Saudis to continue the kind of cozy relationship with them. Obama was the same way. People don't realize how much in the way of arms manufacture and sales went to Saudi Arabia during Obama's tenure. Would you believe $117 billion with a B dollars? That's over the 8-year period. Now, people say to me, "Well, Ray, that sounds a lot, but don't exaggerate, for God's sake. Only half of that is actually had gone to the Saudis." Well, John B., only half of $117 billion is an awful lot of money, and the other half is in the pipeline. So what we're seeing here is people getting richer and richer from making and delivering these arms. And if there should be some sort of détente, if for example we worked out a workable relationship with Russia, as Trump I believe genuinely wanted and still wants, if we could work with the Russians to tamp down the situation in Syria, so that the Saudis aren't so frightened and they don't invest so much money in our arms trade, well, that's very bad for these people who profiteer on all this. So that's part of the situation. The other part, really, when you talked about the leaks and so forth, well, people need to think back on the first major leak, and that was WikiLeaks' release 2 days before the Democratic National Convention last July. Now, it was an amazing trove of emails from the Democratic National Committee. It was immediately seen as so embarrassing that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the chair, and her 4 chief subordinates quit on the spot. That tells you something, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
What happened? Yeah. What happened was this. It was 2 days before the convention, as I said, and I wasn't a fly on the wall, but you could just see Hillary convening her little group there and saying, "Well, what are we going to do about this? My God, if anyone reads these emails, they'll see that we stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders." I mean, it's as clear as could be. All the tricks we pulled to get this nomination. They goes, "I wonder what Bernie's going to do. My God, what do we got 2 days, what are we going to do?" And I could see somebody say, "I know what we do. We'll blame it on the Russians."
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Well, yeah, but the other guy said, well, it wasn't the Russians. It was WikiLeaks. And, they have their own way of getting leaks. And he said, that's all right. No problem. We'll say that WikiLeaks was in cahoots with the Russians. That will work. And we get everybody. We'll enlist the media here. We'll get them to tell the story. Who did this? Who did this? This was the Russians. It was the Russians. And nobody will read the emails and see what we did. What do you think? Last question. Yeah, what's the rationale? Why would the Russians and WikiLeaks do this? Oh, come on. The rationale simply is that Vladimir Putin clearly wants Trump to win. Now, John B., I've followed Russian leaders real closely for 50 years now. I think I know a little bit about how they look at the world. So here's Putin, sitting around during our election process, and he's looking at Trump, and he's saying, wow, this guy is unpredictable. And, well, he brags about being unpredictable. And, my God, look how he lashes out at every slight, whether it's real or perceived. He's irascible. He's unpredictable. Oh, man, this is going to be great. That's just the guy I want to have with his fingers on the nuclear codes on the other side of the ocean. Oh, man, I sure hope Trump wins, and I'm going to do everything to help him win. Give me a break. Putin looked at this election probably a lot like I did. I didn't see any the real favorite candidate. And, the other thing is, and this is, the logic which doesn't appear much in our newspapers or TV shows. The other thing is this. I thought Hillary was going to win. I think 99% of my friends thought Hillary was going to win. New York Times said she's hand-down winner. Okay, so here's Putin. Now, unless you want to suggest that Vladimir Putin is clairvoyant and that he has some special connection with God, and God said, no, Vlad, no, Hillary's going to lose. Trump's going to win. Unless he saw this differently from everybody else, what is the percentage in hacking into the DNC, Democratic National Committee, in a way that probably would be revealed and discovered, and fouling up whatever residual respect there was between between Putin and Clinton. So the whole thing, the whole major premise falls on its face. Putin, if he wanted Trump to win, well, that doesn't speak very well for his knowledge about how unpredictable Trump would be. And number two, if Hillary is a hands-down winner, no smart politician is going to risk incurring her wrath when she becomes president. The other thing is we know, and this might be of interest to especially all your listeners here, because we now have been proven right in trying to figure out all this made up. In this case, Trump is quite right. He says all this made up Russia stuff. Well, it is made up.
Yep.
I told you how it began right before the Democratic National Committee, but there has been not one scintilla of evidence, real evidence, that shows that the Russians got that material to WikiLeaks, the material that WikiLeaks revealed on the Democratic National Committee. So how did Julian Assange get that material? It was very clear to us, John B., that it was a leak and not a hack. Now, how do we know that? Well, our little group of former intelligence officers is possessed of incredible expertise in these matters, including 3 recently retired NSA technical directors, one of whom, Bill Binney, built these systems and knows that now this is going to boggle your mind as it did mine, every single phone call and email is tracked on the network. They know who sent it. They know who revealed it. They can do that, and they do that. And the reason that Bill Binney, the former NSA technical director, can tell us all this now is because Ed Snowden gave us the slides. I mean, the top secret code word slides that show exactly how they do it, where they have these little trace routes and all that stuff. So what am I saying? I'm saying I acted in my old capacity, and I used to be a national intelligence officer. And what you do then is if you have a real problem, you find the best guy, the most reliable guy, and the guy with the most long-standing expertise. So I said, Bill, look, if this is technically impossible, in other words, if it's impossible that the Russians hacked into the DNC and NSA doesn't know about it, if that's impossible, let's just tell the world that that's impossible. And so it wasn't a hack, it was a leak. And so we did do a memo which appeared in Baltimore Sun on the 5th of January, and we come back to that once the break. If this is a break, John B., I can respect that.
Well, that's all right. Now, when we come back, you're gonna hit us with what? What's going to be the thing that comes right out of the gate?
Well, I'm going to tell you why it's a bum rap.
Excellent.
They say that the Russians hacked, and there's two other reasons I can adduce, and they're pretty waterproof.
That's beautiful. When we come back, Ray McGovern's going to tell us why it's a bum rap to blame the Russians. I love it when this happens. I suspect they're actually our friends, or would like to be, but we just keep, well, maybe that's just naivete. I am John B. Wells. This is Ark Midnight. Our guest is Ray McGovern. We shall return. Yeah. Cover up your eyes. That means put a tape over your camera. I've been doing that since about 2002. It's absolutely unbelievable what's going on out there. But I got a question for you. And I'm going to run this past Ray McGovern here in a minute. When he tells us why it's a bum rap to put this on the Russians, then we're going to talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and his disgruntled supporters who felt strongly, in fact, they didn't feel it, they believe it. And I think they're right, that Hillary Clinton bumped him out of position. So what about Seth Rich? I want to talk to Ray about Seth Rich. That's later in the program, but I'm just giving you a heads up, you see. Seth Rich worked for the Democratic National Committee. Shot in the back, left on the sidewalk. He was alive when the cops got there, so go the reports. Didn't take his cell phone, didn't take his money, his wallet, his keys, nothing. I wonder if he's the one who did the leaking of all those emails. 40,000 emails. Yep. This is going to get deep. It's no wonder there are a lot of people quivering in their athletic supporters on Capitol Hill right now. We'll get to all that and ever so much more. You're listening to the light version of Caravan to Midnight. Come see us at caravantomidnight.com and consider becoming a member. 744 shows in archive right now. So come on. And by the way, you're listening to Devo, just to mix things up a little bit, you know.
What do G. Edward Griffin, Lord Christopher Monckton of Brenchley, Ty Bollinger, Patrick Wood, James Corbett, and John B. Wells have in common? All of these, plus a whole lot more, are going to be speaking at the upcoming Red Pill Expo, June 23rd and 24th in Bozeman, Montana, sponsored by the legendary author and producer G. Edward Griffin. You are invited to attend, hear some great messages, meet the speakers and like-minded people, and have some fun in the big sky of Montana. Go to caravantomidnight.com for full details.
The question is, do you really want to know? If you do, join the Caravan to Midnight at caravantomidnight.com. Now, more Ark Midnight with John B. Wells.
All right. Ray McGovern, it's really good to have you with us, and I appreciate your candor. I mean, you're so forthcoming when you come on the program, and I just kind of watch my step a little bit because, as I've said many times over the public airwaves, I'm not sure which is going to be less discreet, the question or the potential answer. But so I'm trying to mind my pints and quarts, okay?
Yeah.
So about that bum rap.
Yeah, let me just start out in a very grand way, and in that way encourage your listeners to pay really close attention. As part of this is technical, but I'm no technical person, and even I understand it now, and so I'll try to outline it. But the main conclusion that I've come to, and my colleagues as well, is that the, quote, Russian hack, end quote, of the Democratic National Committee before before the convention was not done by Russia. It was done by the CIA. Whoa. Now, okay, McGovern, prove that. Well, let me go back to the difference between a leak and a hack. I talked about the fact that every hack has to go over the network, over the electronic network, and the NSA intercepts all that stuff and knows the provenance and knows the destination of all these hacks. They haven't been able to come up with any evidence that Russia was involved from any of these real messages, emails or phone calls or whatever. And the reason they haven't come up with any evidence is because it was not a hack. In other words, that material was not gotten through a hack. It was gotten through a leak. Now, a leak is very different. I've learned this from my technical colleagues there at NSA. A leak, as some people know, is when you take a thumb drive, right, and you stick it in your machine, your computer, and you download material. It never goes over the network. It just goes into your little thumb drive, and then you give it to your best friend, and he gives it to one of Julian Assange's best friends. And that's what happened. That's how Julian Assange got this material. Now, you talked a little bit about Seth Rich.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know how this leak happened. Let's forget about hack. There's no hack, okay?
Yeah.
How the leak happened until there was this terrible event in July where this young Democratic National Committee staffer, Seth Rich, was gunned down early in the morning on the black streets of Washington, not far from his home, shot in the back a couple of times. It was construed by the D.C. police as to have been a robbery that went bad. But, it was really, really curious, John B., because they forgot to take his wallet or his watch or his $2,000 necklace or his credit cards. So it's some robbery, okay? So we smelled the rat from the beginning. Now, what happened? Well, about 10 days later, Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, goes on TV and he says, this is a terrible thing, what happened to Mr. Rich. It illustrates what happens to whistleblowers, the risks that they take. And so WikiLeaks is going to offer a $20,000 reward for anybody who can tell us who did this dastardly act. Now, I listened to that, John B., and I said, my God, no, wait a second. Julian Assange never reveals his sources, never says a damn thing about his sources. That's the way they have confidence in coming to him with their leaks. Why? And then I said, wait a second, McGovern. The guy's dead, right? If it was Seth Rich, he's dead.
Yeah.
And so why not point out these things? And after many months now, we have these reports that you alluded to briefly, and that is that Seth Rich had in his computer thousands and thousands of emails that he had sent to WikiLeaks. So it looks, now this is not, ironclad yet, because I haven't seen the computer and nobody I really trust has seen the computer. It's either with the FBI, which doesn't always do the right thing, or the D.C. police, which is the same. So we'll have to see exactly how this checks out. But there's every reason to believe that the people at the Democratic National Committee, these young people who are bushy-eyed and just really happy to work on these committees and had worked for Bernie Sanders for months, then they say, well, he's given up, so we'll go work for Hillary. We've got to win. And then they see all these emails that show that their candidate, Bernie Sanders, was cheated out of the nomination, pure and simple. Now, you're a young guy, you say, my God, it's awful. So somebody's got to know about this, right? So what does he do? He puts a little thumb drive or whatever medium he used into his computer, downloads it, and gets it to Julian Assange. Julian reports all this in a very orderly way without touching any of the documentary evidence. That's important, okay? When people say, well, what's Julian Assange's take on this? That's the wrong question. It's not a take. These are documents. These are the kinds of things that detectives, or in my experience, intelligence analysts absolutely lust after documentary evidence, okay? No one has ever accused Julian Assange of fooling around with these documents, changing them in any way. He even includes the metadata on the top, and actually he's been accused of releasing too much. But the point is simply this, that when Julian was saying that this shows the risks that whistleblowers run, he was referring to Seth Rich. It's almost certain in my estimation, and so it should come as no surprise that all these Democrats and some Republicans that are lashing out against Donald Trump for being in Vladimir Putin's bed because he wanted him to win, and the Russians hacked into the election system to ensure that Trump won, and so Trump is a false leader there. He has no legitimate claim on the presidency. That's the way the legend goes in this town. It's really crazy. Now, this is really important because what we're seeing here is what we've come to call the deep state. Who did all this stuff? Well, this will really shock you. When I say the hack, not the leak, but the so-called, quote, Russian hack, end quote, was, in my view, not done by the Russians, but done by the CIA to pin it on the Russians. Now, can I prove that? I think I can. Again, if you've listened up closely, I'll try to make it as simple as it's a little bit technical, okay? So what do we have? We have WikiLeaks, ironically, getting leaks from people within the CIA. This is highly embarrassing, needless to say, because it's the most sensitive information that CIA has. John Brennan, the head of CIA, set up an entire directorate to deal with cyber warfare, okay? Planting things, making things to appear that other than they are. Now, what do we know? WikiLeaks on the 31st of March, and again, you won't learn this in the New York Times or in any of the cable or news outlets because they've avoided it like the plague. But here it is. WikiLeaks released March 31st as part of what they call a Vault 7 release. They released original CIA documents. Now, were these documents, were they reported in the press? As I said, no. What did they show? Well, they show that the agency had created a program enabling it to break into computers and servers and, get this, make it look like others did it by leaving little telltale signs like, maybe a little Russian Cyrillic markings, maybe.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
Like they're that clumsy, really?
Yeah. So, that was another thing that they would be that clumsy. But the capabilities. Now, I checked with my NSA colleagues on this, the retirees that work with us, and they said that this is an incredibly sophisticated program because it's not easy to hide the provenance of these leaks. Bill Binney, again, the former technical director who created many of these NSA programs, he said that CIA and the NSA worked for 15 years, count them, 15 years on this program, and that it requires hundreds of millions of lines of source code. Now, I said, Bill, that's really nice. Sounds like a lot. What does it mean? They said, Ray, one line of source code costs $25, all right? Now, 100 million, that costs $2.5 billion, all right? Do the math, Ray. This is what it costs. Could CrowdStrike or some commercial virus detector firm compete with this? Of course they couldn't. And so that kind of money was devoted. Now, why was it that CIA did this? Well, they do the clandestine stuff. NSA helps them with the technology. So bottom line here is that we know about a CIA program that allowed the CIA to hack into computers and sources, and this is the word used in the CIA documents, obfuscate okay? They obfuscate the origin of these messages, and they work in 5 different languages. Get this: Chinese, Farsi, Arabic, Korean, and, last but not least, Russian. Why do they work in these languages? Because then they can leave these, quote, telltale signs behind, like Cyrillic, to disguise the fact that it was the CIA that did this and blame it on the Russians. Now, I am 90% sure, and Bill Binney is 95% sure, this is exactly what we have here. And that's why, so if you follow that, the next step comes with James Comey, who's a member of this deep state. Now, he's the head of the FBI, right?
Yep.
And so there's a big to-do about who hacked into the Democratic National Committee. You know, who did it? Well, what did the Russians? Well, how did the Russians do it? Well, we don't know exactly. So Mr. Comey, he's testifying before the House Intelligence Committee, right? And so, Mr. Comey, tell us about the forensics there that you got from the Democratic National Committee computers. And he says, sort of shifting around in his seat, I have to tell you that we didn't really get any forensics. We didn't get access to the Democratic National Committee computers. Now I recognize everybody says it's best if you're doing forensics to get physical access to the machines or the computers, but we relied on CrowdStrike forensics, and I know that's not the bad, but that's what we relied on. Well, give me a break. This is the crux of the problem. If the FBI isn't investigating who did these hacks, okay, and refuses to get physical control of the computers, what does that tell you? That tells me that James Comey was very, very reluctant to get his experts, his technicians, to go to those computers because they might have found and reported back to Comey, my God, Mr. Comey, you won't believe the sophistication of the program. This is a program that can insert languages like Russian and so forth. Do you want us to? My God, we can't handle this. And certainly CrowdStrike, the commercial, they couldn't figure this out. But do you want us to go to the NSA for help on this? They might be able to help. Comey would say, no, thanks, just the same. No. So he didn't even want to take that chance. And so what did he do? He flubbed the dub. He admittedly did not even seek access to those computers. He preferred to rely on this 2-bit firm, which is already very much under suspicion because of who owned it and who started it. He'd much rather rely on that because this firm had no capability of detecting this incredibly sophisticated program that cost billions and billions of dollars. So the whole thing is incestuous. The whole thing is kind of deep state-ish because you have Comey, head of the FBI. You have John Brennan, who seems to have disappeared into thin air, head of the CIA at the time, and you had these clowns with military dress on, head of the NSA, who would salute and do whatever you want, and then we had the confessed perjurer James Clapper, who is head of the entire National Committee arrangement. He is the guy, of course, who lied under oath when he was asked by Senator Wyden of Oregon, does the NSA collect or intercept information on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? And you can see you see him scratching his bald head there. He says, no, sir. Not wittingly. Well, that was March of 2013, John B.
Yep.
In June of 2013, Ed Snowden proved James Clapper a liar. In July of 2013, Clapper sent a letter to the Senate Intelligence Committee saying, what I said was clearly erroneous, and I'm really sorry. So,
and how about just recently when he was sitting in front of some committee, or maybe it was, for all I know at this point, I'm slightly confused because there's so much stuff hitting the fan at once. He said, yeah, we did unmask somebody once. Once? I got some questions. Let me fire a barrage of questions out here. For people out there that...
let me just finish up with Clapper. Clapper, that was July of 2013. Well, immediately Obama dismissed Clapper because Clapper lied under oath to the Senate, right? And the Senate was up in arms, right? Wrong. They were all in it together. Clapper was allowed to stay on as head of the whole intelligence community from March 2013 until Obama left in January. It was 2017, huh? So that's 4 more years? So that shows you how entrenched the deep state is, how the people who are supposed to be overseeing these liars, these perjurers, say, oh, okay, it was clearly erroneous. Well, hang around. Maybe you could do better next time. And then you can see his recent testimony, even after he left office. The guy is not to be trusted, but he's a star witness for people who want to spin this yarn that the Russians gave Mr. Trump the presidency.
Ray, this is really, really something. It would have been great to have been head of, what they're trying to do up there is put together their own little KGB. That's what they want to do, where the intelligence services and the political sector are just not, they're not just in bed together, they're like connected at the hip. It would have been interesting to be a czar-like FBI Director John B. I don't think that FBI Director John B., number one, I think I'm going to just scratch that concept altogether. I think Mr. Trump is right. I think James Comey is a nutbag. Get this, folks. No access to Democratic National Committee computers over the hacks. Why not? I'll tell you what. Hold the line just 1 minute. I want 25 hostage rescue team guys over there right now, seal the whole area, seize those computers right now. This is a matter of national security. Number two, did he ever seize Hillary Rodham Clinton's server? I don't know. Oh, and why the immunity deals? And why the you can destroy your laptops and your Blackberries if you want to. I mean, why start offering immunity deals right away? I think it's because if this ever got out into, oh, Lord forbid, for them anyway, open court, I don't think that any of the proceedings would cast Director Comey in a very good light. Maybe we could talk about that when we come out of this break, okay?
Sounds good. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there I go again. I'm just trying to avoid a freak thinking accident here, but seriously, you're going to tell me the director of the FBI can't say, I want those servers, and I want them now, and you will give them to me. This is Ark Midnight. I am John B. Wells. We shall return. Stand by, please. Oh, boy. Cornell, what'd you go and do that for? I miss him. Great musician. So many of them are, checking out of here on account of having lived like for decade after decade after decade after decade after decade. They're getting to be some old cats now, but good grief. He just did himself in, so I guess he figured out what would kill him. There's nothing like a belt around your neck in your hotel room to do that. Listen, folks, I want to say something. If you know somebody, he was depressed. I mean, the guy had everything. He really did. So, apart from the music that he left behind, if you know somebody who is struggling with depression, find the way to get them some help. I stated this on Caravan to Midnight last week. These past weekdays. They can be counseled out of it, they can be loved out of it, and if necessary, medicated out of it, but do something to help them, because creative people are very, very prone to this sort of thing, so watch out. We're going to take a break, finish up, and go to the top of the hour with Mr. McGovern. But a few more notes. Just a few more notes.
You're listening to Ark Midnight with John B. Wells. Now, here is John B.
Ray McGovern, I'm having a good time, and I hope you are too. You sound like you're having a pretty good time. Isn't it fun to get all this stuff out into the open? I mean, seriously.
It's nice to be able to talk. Yeah, it is.
You like to be able to talk about what?
It's nice to be able to talk about this, about these kinds of things, because, it's a little frustrating. I used to get on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, BBC, fairly regularly, a couple times a year at least, NPR, PBS. But for some reason or other, they don't call me anymore, John B.
I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is. That's just me, and
there's a broader lesson here, and I say this every time I go on the air, and that is that being around for a half a century in this town, well, you see a lot of change, right? But there's one change. That dwarfs all the other changes in significance, and that is that we no longer have, in any real sense, a free media, and that's big. People still think they can read the New York Times and get all the news that's fit to print. They still think they can put their feet up at night and watch the TV news and find out what's going on. It's not the case. And so that's the bad news. The good news, of course, is that there's a fifth estate, what I call a fifth estate in the ether. I don't know how it works, but it comes down to my computer. And if I know the right websites to look for, I can find out what's going on. It's just that most people of my generation are a little intimidated by, well, if they push the wrong keys, they might break the thing, right? So
yeah.
My grandchildren said, well, but you can't break it. Here, watch. And they pick it up and they throw it against the wall. And no, don't throw it against the wall. Just show me. You can't break it. No, and you can. And so if people could just ask their grandchildren, show them just 3 keys to get onto consortiumnews.com or your program or RayMcGovern.com, which is my website. You can really find out what's going on. And there are lots of places like that. And there are lots of spurious places as well. But that's the key. And there are 2 most recent examples of that. And that is this business that we were talking about, the capability of CIA to hack into systems, computers and servers, and hide what they did. Not only hide what they did, but insert Cyrillic and blame the Russians. Well, that's proven now. It's original CIA documents. How embarrassing is that, the CIA? But guess what? You won't find word one about that in the New York Times, nor will you find out anything about the person who did the leak, Seth Rich, who you mentioned before. Now, Seth Rich, as we said, worked for the Democratic National Committee, and he was, I'm not sure about this, but the reports were that he was really aghast when he found out that his candidate, Bernie Sanders, was cheated out of the nomination, by all kinds of stratagems. Now, I have some recent, I told my friends that I'm going to be on your program, John B., and so I have some recent information on Seth Rich in his case. The bottom line here is that more and more credibility is being assigned by my colleagues to the conclusion that it was Seth Rich, this young Democratic National Committee worker, who passed the ANC emails to WikiLeaks. And we're going to learn more about that on Tuesday. Why? Because there's a pretty well-known German hacker. He goes by Kim.com. My friends tell me he seems to be a credible source. He's in New Zealand. He's fighting extradition to the United States. Surprise, surprise. But he tweeted today that he was involved in facilitating the leak from Seth Rich to WikiLeaks. And he's going to issue a statement about that on Tuesday after he talks to his lawyers. That's going to be big. But guess what? Look for it on Wednesday in the New York Times. They ain't going to be there. These guys are incredible in the way that they deny our citizens the right to know what's going on. This is a big deal because he was killed, right? He was killed by 2 bullets in the back, 3 o'clock in the morning. Somebody did that. Somebody commissioned that killing, and somebody's hiding the evidence, this computer that allegedly shows that he had this incredible correspondence with WikiLeaks. Now, the person with whom he was corresponding, I know quite well. He's dead now. He died of cancer last year, but he was one of Julian Assange's patrons. He was a good bit older than Julian. He was even older than Ivan. His name was McFadden. And he was on the receiving end of all this stuff, and he got it to Julian, and Julian got it into the system. Now, what happened once WikiLeaks put all that information out about how Hillary stole the election from Bernie Sanders? Well, I told you how they decided to blame it on the Russians, but we have this. I mean, some people are pretty naive, and in that category is Hillary Clinton's PR person. Her name is Jennifer Palmieri, and she wrote this big article for the Washington Post. And then I heard her in person, and she explained, it was really important before the convention that we blame it on the Russians. Now, between you and me, John B., it was a magnificent diversion. It required the complete cooperation of the mainstream media, and they fell to it with a vengeance. It was the Russians. It was the Russians. Who cares about what the emails say? It was the Russians, okay? Now, Palmieri admits, at the convention, I took this golf cart, and we drove around to all the cable news outlet tents, and we told them it was the Russians, so that they wouldn't focus on the content of these emails. And, it was too much of a stretch. I mean, well, actually, it was a stretch for us, says Jennifer Palmieri. But after a while, when we got back to Brooklyn, to headquarters, then some intelligence sources came to us and showed us that it was the Russians, and man, that helped a lot. Then people started to believe it. So here's the PR person admitting how this thing went down, okay? That's how corrupt this whole thing was. Now, do you learn that from the media? Well, when they forget how they're supposed to hide everything and write these articles for the Washington Post and then talk freely at Hillary Clinton's think tank, which I habituate by lurking in the corners, you learn all kinds of stuff. So that's how bad it was. That's how bad it was to, number one, blame those leaks on Russian hacking, so that Hillary could say, look, Trump's in with the Russians before the election and make sure that he loses, right? Well, that didn't go down so well, right? Well, after the election, what happens? Well, they go into high gear. Why? Because John Brennan, the head of the CIA, and the others were hell-bent and determined to turn the Electoral College around. They only needed, 60 people or so to change their votes out of many hundred. And so they put out all this stuff, and they asked Obama, we have 60 briefers. Can you let me send them out and brief each one of these electoral people that we think we might be able to turn before they vote? And Obama's kind of wishy-washy. He said, well, no, I don't. It's a good idea, John, but I don't think that would work. That would be a little too much, So he goes with the story that the Russians hacked, but he won't let John Brennan try to turn the Electoral College around. So the Electoral College wins, right? Then Trump is still not president. What are they trying to do? Well, they leak all these things, and these are lousy leaks. I mean, these are criminal leaks because they're leaks of highly sensitive, intercepted conversations involving American citizens. Now, John B., when I was working in those vineyards, and NSA intercepted a conversation or a message that included the name of a U.S. citizen, the piece of paper I would get would have that name razored out, okay? Razored out. So the technology was that primitive then, but they took the trouble to razor those things out. Now it all comes in true name to the highest echelons, like John Brennan, like Comey, like the head of NSA. They get the true names without even having to unmask them. So this whole charade about who unmasked, they get the true names off the bat. And so what did they do? Well, I said, now let's get at Trump by let's get Mike Flynn, his General Flynn, who's his national security advisor, designate. Let's besmirch him. We got this conversation. Oh, He's talking with the Russian ambassador. What is he talking about? Oh, they mentioned sanctions. And so this lovely lady, what's her name? Yates, Sally Yates.
Yeah.
Who, she did. Yeah, she's told by these intelligence guys, oh my God, look at what you got to go tell the White House about this. Go tell the White House. Look, he lied to the vice president. Now, it's not her place to go to the White House and say one part of the White House or White House designate is lying to the other. That's not her place, but she goes anyway because she's afraid. What is she afraid of? Well, this doesn't hold water either. She's afraid that Mike Flynn might be compromised. He might be subject to Russian blackmail. Give me a break. The material is right out in the open. This is the stuff they would normally discuss. Maybe he made a mistake by not remembering that they did talk about sanctions, but they got him, right?
Yeah.
And the sorrowful thing is that they drew blood, okay? And Trump's advisors decided to throw Mike Flynn under the bus. Why? Well, it just got to be too much. They just were, everybody and his brother was talking to the Russians, well, let's give them one sacrificial lamb. That doesn't work in this town. That doesn't work at all. They smelled blood, and they're still going on this rampage, and the mainstream media, so-called, is a very willing, energetic accomplice, not only by parlaying all these rumors, but by hiding the evidence of what really went down, the evidence that I used a little while ago.
And that was Sally Yates, the one that was acting AG for a while, yeah?
Yeah, now she's sort of I happen to agree with what she did in saying I'm not going to send lawyers from the Justice Department to enforce a executive order that violates the First Amendment of the Constitution, the clause against discrimination because of religion. I think she was a gutsy person on that. That's her field. I mean, she knows the law. She knows the Constitution. She took the same oath we all did. But letting herself be bamboozled into saying, oh, my God, look, Mike Flynn's talked to the Russian ambassador, and he lied to the vice president. You, the deputy or the acting attorney general, you have to go to the White House and tell them about this, that one part of the White House is lying to the other. Lying. Well, anyhow. So she did. And now she's the rationale for why she did that, also provided by the intelligence people, is, oh, Flynn got compromised. Oh, he's subject to blackmail. These things are, for anyone who knows about how these things work, they were a stretch beyond imagination, and I feel sorry for her because she probably still thinks she did the right thing, but she let herself be conned into playing this role. And, of course, as soon as she brought it to the White House, it was leaked by these people who want to do Flynn, but also Trump and all his associates in. Now, the bottom line here is that Trump has set the battle here. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying that the deep state is real. Okay, it's much more real than when I served in intelligence. And one glaring example of how real this is came on the 3rd of January on Rachel Maddow's show. Okay, who is she interviewing? Chuck Schumer, senator from New York, who is the leading Democrat in the Senate now. Okay, so what does he say? He says, Rachel, I used to think Trump was a smart guy, but he's done something very, very foolish. And Rachel says, oh, what's that, Senator Schumer? He says, well, he's taken on the CIA. And the CIA has 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. And I thought he was a pretty smart businessman, and he would pick us back my arm because he's done something very, very foolish. End quote. Now, if you were Rachel Maddow, John B., you would have said, excuse me, Senator Schumer, are you saying that the President of the United States should be afraid of the CIA? Is that what you're saying? But no, she said, oh, we're going to break now, yeah? Well, what is the meaning of what Schumer says? It happens to be reality in this town, right? You can't pick a fight with the CIA and the rest of the deep state without facing the consequences. So, bottom line for me is Trump has done that. He's taken on the CIA and the deep state. If he's done this out of the best of intentions, that's good. Whatever his intentions, it's an uphill battle, John B., and it's far from certain that the President of the United States will win this one. It's been rare in history that they have won. John Kennedy is one example, and there are others who others. My God, Obama is the archetypical example. John Brennan, the head of the CIA, had some kind of hold on Senator Obama and then candidate Obama and then President Obama. And that explains an awful lot of things why Obama did not act the way he had led people to believe he would act as president. So it's real, and it's going to be really interesting over the next couple of months whether the deep state is going to do this kind of soft coup, either to make Trump completely powerless or actually to remove him from office.
Do you think that, of course, anything's possible, but do you think that has a snowball's chance of actually happening, this removing him from office?
Yes, I do.
Do you really? Wow.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on domestic politics, but if you get a couple of prominent Republicans who face a tight race 2 years from now, or 1 year and a half from now, and feel it politically beneficial for them to ditch Trump or to join in an attempt to impeach him, they're going to do it. They have no principle. They just want to get reelected. Now, do I think that would work? On balance, I don't think it will work right now. But after 2 years, we'd have to see how the next by-elections go. And the bottom line is that he's disabled. He's seriously disabled. And the one really good policy offensive that he had announced he would do, namely cool down the tensions with Russia, there's no reason why that can't be done, except that peace is bad for business, as I explained before. And so if he's encumbered from doing that, if indeed he's encouraged to, lash out with Tomahawk cruise missiles and all that kind of stuff, just to show how he's not in Putin's pocket, right? I'm not in Putin's pocket. Oh, watch this, 59 of these things. He warns the Russians 2 hours before, so he didn't kill any of them. But, he's in a bind. And if he's willing to, do the kinds of things he did, shooting those Tomahawks out there into Syria, just to show that he's not in Putin's pocket, well, it's not only McGovern worries about this, it's Putin and the Russians, because the last thing they want is somebody who's unpredictable, somebody who lashes out in a kind of reckless way when his numbers go way down, and he sees the next day, not only do his numbers go shooting up because now he's acting presidential, but what happens to the stock of Raytheon who makes the cruise missiles? It soars 30%. So is this a great country or what? I mean, that's what we have here, and that's what Trump himself has to deal with.
Oh, boy. This is really very disturbing. For a moment, I will think like Russian. Okay, this is what we do. We get a couple of 3 Republicans, senator, congressmen, whatever we have, our best people. Then what we do is we have them go after Donald Trump, hold Donald Trump down. This will anger people. At midterm elections, they will be thrown out. Democrats come in, and Republic is destroyed. Just saying. Yeah.
I don't know. I like to put myself in Putin's place and try to, as you just did, try to figure out how he sees his equities here. I think people need to know what really bothers him the most, aside from the unpredictability and recklessness that he sees in Washington. He has a legitimate strategic concern, John B., and that is this
anti-ballistic missile system that the U.S. is putting around the periphery of European Russia and also now in the Far East. Perhaps we can talk about that because that's real. That's not fake news. That's a real capability.
All right, and let's do that. His Putin's strategic concerns, yes, indeed. Of course, he's got submarines. I don't know how serious that could be, but I want to talk to you about the origins of the deep state. Ark writer Paul wanted to know, how far back does this go? This is Ark Midnight. I am John B. Wells. Our guest is Ray McGovern. We'll be right back. Oh, boy. I'm waiting on a piece of data right now about the doctor who attended Seth Rich. So I'm going to allege something. I'm going to declare without proof, and I declare it only because I have enough proof to feel strongly about this. That was a hit. Now, you may not know about this, but there was this fellow named Rob Wheeler, private investigator hired by the Rich family, suggesting there's tangible evidence on Rich's laptop that confirms he was communicating with WikiLeaks prior to his death. His services were offered to the family and paid for by a third party, according to a statement issued by the Rich family, which also includes that, quote, the private investigator who spoke to press was offered to the Rich family and paid for by a third party, and contractually was barred from speaking to press or anyone outside of law enforcement or the family unless explicitly authorized by the family. And then there's this whole thing about the little the email between John Podesta, which said he'd like an example made of one of these leakers, whether or not we really have enough to go on. It's, look, I really want to find out just so I know how far back this deep state goes and how deep it really is. But I suspect that the song that you're hearing right now is really appropriate. What do they think that we're going to do if they pull this president down out of office, and then we wind up with a Hillary Clinton after all? I'm also going to ask Ray McGovern about the uranium deal. I'm John B. Wells. This is Ark Midnight.
The latest wave of knockoff gravity filter systems utilize black elements that mimic the appearance of black Berkey elements, but these elements are less powerful. They deteriorate when filtering high levels of chemicals such as chlorine, and they produce water at an agonizingly slow rate. One element even arrives wet in a bag because if it dries out, it stops working. If you own a slow flow system, we have good news. You can upgrade to the power of black Berkey purification elements. That's because they're interchangeable with most slow flow gravity systems. These powerful purification elements filter water 8 times faster than slow flow elements. This means that by replacing 4 slow flow elements with only 2 black Berkey elements, you save a bunch and your system will produce about 4 times more water. Stop the aggravation and upgrade your system with fast flow black Berkey elements, the most powerful gravity-fed purification elements available. Get your black Berkey C2M special by ordering online at berkeywater.com/C2M or call 877-857-PURE.
It's not a programming glitch, nor some science you don't understand. It's Ark Midnight with John B. Wells.
Yeah, this was a part of an email thread between John Podesta and Joel Benson. Now, right here on GatewayPundit.com, it says Joel Benenson, but then it is Joel Benenson. Yep. I agree. When we have press staff, this will be much easier, and I would love an example being made. John Podesta writes back, agree. Happy to talk to the Davids. Call me crazy, but I think if we can survive the next month, it'll be possible, maybe even straightforward, to get our arms around this once there is an actual campaign. And in red, I'm definitely for making an example of a suspected leaker, whether or not we have any real basis for it. And I'm waiting on some data now that would indicate that the doctor tried to save him when the medics were called to the scene of Seth Rich lying there, shot in the back twice. And it's like, suggests that maybe just let him go. Maybe just let him go. Pretty serious. I mean, how many bodies in the wake of the Clintons, whether or not they're directly responsible for it or not, and I strongly suspect that they are, how many bodies do we need before we figure it out there's a real problem here, and it's a criminal problem. Ray, let me ask you something. We're going to get into this this thing about Vladimir Putin's strategic concerns. But let me ask you something about the Clintons. Why would... It's my understanding that Hillary Clinton was a key player in brokering away 20% of our uranium reserves to the Russians through Uranium One. Started off as Uranium One and wound up Radatom, I think. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, it seems to me if anybody was going to throw their weight behind one of the candidates, and it was going to be the Russians doing the weight throwing, then they would have thrown in for Clinton, wouldn't they?
Well, they would if it weren't for the fact that the mainstream media is tied in with the Clinton crowd. So she could use a Russian AK-47 and shoot up a whole bunch of people in Brooklyn, and it wouldn't be
okay.
It would be blamed on the Russians, but not her. It would be blamed on Trump. Now, I just got a little bit of extra information on the Seth Rich thing, and this is really interesting. As I say, my people are keeping me fed here. Here's a little tidbit. Brad Bauman, okay? Who's he? Well, he's the Seth Rich family spokesman. Now, turns out he's a professional Democratic National Committee crisis PR consultant. So, I feel real sorry for the Rich family. I think they come from Nebraska, and, I don't think they're wise to the ways of Washington. But the bottom line here is that they were persuaded to hire Brad Bauman, DNC crisis consultant, to be their spokesman and to allow nothing to come in or out except through him. Now that smells to high heaven right there. Brad Bauman. So there's another little link there that this is not on the up and up. The business about the doctor, again, that I haven't verified that, but apparently Seth was still alive when he got to the hospital. That should become clear from hospital records unless somebody has absconded with them. So, Seth Rich was hit. And it's all but sure in my mind that was because he was the leaker, not the Russians, not the Russians hacking. This was the leaker to WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange has pretty much admitted that. So this whole diversion of attention, blaming the Russians for a hack that never happened, it was masterful because I dare say that 70%, 80% of the American people believe that to be true. Why? Because they don't have any alternative way of knowing what the real truth is. This is really, really, really a lamentable situation, but it's been going on for a while. And maybe I could, John B., turn to the question about how long this deep state stuff has been going on. Would you like to treat that next, or do you have something else in mind?
Very much. Very much. Paul sent us a message and said, hey, ask Ray, how deep is it? How deep is deep, and how far back in time does this go?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, Paul. And the answer is not really very, you say encouraging. A lot of this stuff I learned well after my service as a CIA analyst. But I did come on duty when John Kennedy was president, and I was proud to serve under him, but it was only for, April until November 1963. He was killed. And the person who was allowed to run the Warren Commission investigation was a fellow named Alan Dulles, who had been head of the CIA and had been cashiered by John Kennedy. You don't do those things to very, very important people in Washington. Alan Dulles, the head of the CIA, was the brother of John Foster Dulles, the Secretary of State. And long story short, if you're interested in how John Kennedy was done in, the best book on this, which takes advantage of all prior research, including the release of recent documents by Congressional Act, It's a book by James Douglas, two S's on the end of Douglas, and it's called JFK and the Unspeakable. I've read that book twice. I think he's got it right. It was a cabal. People afraid that John Kennedy was going to be too soft on the commies, that he was going to withdraw from Vietnam, which indeed he had already executed 2 executive orders, one to pull out 1,000 troops by the end of 1963, and the other to pull out the bulk of the rest of them by the end of 1965. My God, he was going to give Southeast Asia to the commies, right? And besides, he didn't support the Bay of Pigs invasion. He's a soft guy in commies. We got to get rid of him. Now, it's a really intricate story. Dulles tells it well. He was 10 years working on this thing. I suggest everyone take a look if they're interested. JFK and the Unspeakable. Now, what have I learned more recently? Well, what about LBJ? How about Lyndon Johnson?
Yeah.
Did he know about this?
Well, considering he was about to go to jail for all kinds of things, or so it appears, starting Billy Saul Estes, Bobby Baker, people like that.
Yeah, he was a thug, and James Douglas, who's a good friend of mine, has told me, there is evidence that LBJ knew what was going to happen. One of these things was a well-sourced conversation between one of his security guards, his favorite security guard, LBJ's security guard, and this security guard's daughter. And he said, something's going down here. LBJ has asked us to double his security detail, and something really bad's going to happen. And she said, what is it? And he said, well, I can't tell you. She said, well, are you doubling Kennedy's security detail? And he says, no, we haven't told Kennedy. That was a couple of months before November 1963. So that's the kind of deep state we're working with. And I tell you a little personal vignette here. I was one of these junior officer trainees at the time, right? And we were treated down in this undesignated location that we call the farm during our training to a speech by one of the old case officers, the CIA, and he was ranting and raving about the sitting president. Kennedy's no good. He's soft on communism. He didn't support the Bay of Pigs invasion. He's a terrible. And I left that lecture thinking, oh, this is somewhat unusual, Ray. Here we are working for President Kennedy, and this guy is ranting. And I think it was E. Howard Hunt. I wish I did take notes, but you couldn't keep the notes, take them home with you. So, this is how bitter they felt. And it was not only the CIA, it was the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which Deputy Secretary of State George Ball at the time described as a sewer of deceit. A sewer of deceit. The Joint Chiefs of Staff. They had all kinds of plans to get at Fidel Castro and all these kinds of things. So that's where, it goes back at least as far as that. And you look more deeply at how Nixon won the presidency. It was nip and tuck with Hubert Humphrey. And LBJ, I don't know if people remember this, but LBJ had finally gotten the North Vietnamese to come to Paris to talk about peace, okay? Well, the American people were pretty relieved about that, right? And all he needed to do now is get the South Vietnamese to come. And they were on their way until Anna Chennault, speaking for the South Vietnamese and her Taiwanese people, told the president, look, we can get the South Vietnamese to refuse to come. And, that might help you in the elections just a week away. If they refuse to come, all hope of a peaceful solution will disappear. You want us to do that? And LBJ said, well, why not? And she did, and that's what happened. Now, how do I know that? Intercepted communications. How do we know that? Well, Bob Perry, who's my mentor, he's an investigative journalist,
completely professional, he went to the LBJ library and he found this envelope with messages from Walt Rostow, who was the National Security Advisor at the time, and they knew about this. The FBI came to them 5 days before the election and said, look what's going on here. Look, Nixon is promising the South Vietnamese a better deal if they don't come to the negotiations in Paris. And LBJ says, oh, darn. Well, and he doesn't do anything about it. He's exhausted. He asks his wise men, Clark Clifford, what do you think I should do about this? And you know what they tell him? They tell him, well, Nixon might win. Who cares about Humphrey? Nixon might win, and then if this comes out, it would hobble his presidency. So be a gentleman and just don't say anything. And that's what happened. Now, that was all recorded in Walter Rostow's notes, which Bob Perry fished out of this secret envelope in the bowels of the LBJ library in, I think it's Austin, Texas. Okay? Now, what else happens here? Well, do you remember about the plumbers and how they actually were ordered to break into Brookings, the institute there in Washington? Well, that was because Nixon and Rostow thought that those very damaging cables and intercepted messages and so forth were in an envelope in a safe in Brookings. And so the plumbers were instituted for the precise purpose of getting under wraps this material, which was highly damning. And then, of course, they did other tasks at Nixon and Haldeman's and Ehrlichman's request. And so these things have incredible consequences. And the reason I mention them here is because almost nobody knows about this stuff, even though Bob Perry has done this meticulous research. Perry was the guy who revealed the Iran-Contra affair. So he's the best. Anyhow, nobody knows about it because the mainstream press doesn't talk about it, and that's why we have a deep state working under the horizon here, protected by the mainstream media and people like Anna Chennault and the South Vietnamese. And I mean, one can make a very good case that Hubert Humphrey was cheated out of an election win by these last-minute machinations known to the FBI but not acted on by LBJ because he didn't give a rat's patootie whether Humphrey won or not, and he didn't do anything about it because his wise men said, well, Nixon wins, we don't want to hobble his presidency. So that's the kind of stuff that goes on. Maybe that's enough about how this stuff originates, but there's lots that followed that. Maybe one other thing I'd mention is that you remember the Iran hostage business with the 52 hostages in the embassy there in Tehran.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Bill Casey, who became CIA director, and actually Bobby Gates, who later became defense secretary, they fixed it. They told the Iranians, look, don't let those hostages out until the inauguration. Because you let them out, Jimmy Carter might win, and we don't want him to win another term. We can give you a better deal. And indeed, they did give them a better deal, arms for hostages and all that kind of stuff. So this stuff is really bad, and it's beneath the surface, and if it's not for investigative reporters like Bob Perry and others, it never comes to light. And even so, it only comes to light if, as I said before, the right keys to push on these computers that we have these days, which can reveal the deep state, its machinations, and the effect it has on the body politic.
Oh, boy. That whole Iran weapons for hostages deal, didn't that get leaked in some Jordanian bi-monthly newsletter or something, a couple of lines in it that started that whole thing rolling?
Man, you got a good memory. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. That was a long time ago, John B. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I got another story. On that, which is directly related, okay? This was all patently illegal. It was done out of the National Security Council with, what's that guy's name, the Marine Colonel,
North.
in a second.
North.
Yeah, Ollie North, who was in turn working for Brent Scowcroft and then Admiral John Poindexter. Now, what's the story? Well, Bob Perry, who I just mentioned, he won a Polk Award. He won all kinds of awards for uncovering the Iran-Contra. So he leaves AP, comes down for a higher price job with Newsweek. And he's quite, it's quite the thing. So the head of Newsweek takes him to this little gathering that they have with corporate coming down from New York and stuff like that. And I guess we're ready for another break, but I can continue the story on the other side of this because it's very, very revealing.
Okay. All right. So just hold your place right there, and we'll take our break. We can take it now. All right. Our guest is Ray McGovern, CIA analyst turned activist. And I am John B. Wells, delighted to be with you this evening, hosting Ark Midnight, our once-a-week, 3-hour program, the terrestrial adjunct to Caravan to Midnight. Come see us at caravan2midnight.com. Be very nice for you to become a member. We are a family, and we treat each other like family members that we actually like. And speaking of like, would you please like my Facebook page? It unnerves my colleagues when I speak this way, but like the Facebook page, if you will. It'd be nice. And follow us on Twitter. We put a lot of stuff on there, at John B. Wells CTM. Okay? We'll be back. All right, this looks real to me. I've read it 3 or 4 times. It still looks real. 4th-year surgery resident here who rotated at WHC, that's Washington Hospital Center, last year. It won't be hard to identify me, but I feel that I shouldn't stay silent. Seth Risch was shot twice with 3 total gunshot wounds, entry and exit, and entry. He was taken to the OR, the operating room, emergency, where we performed an X-lap and found a small injury to segment 3 of the liver, which was packed, and several small bowel injuries, pretty common for gunshots to the back exiting the abdomen, which we resected, 12 centimeters of bowel, and then left him in discontinuity. Didn't hook everything back up, with the intent of performing a washout in the morning. He did not have any major vascular injuries or otherwise. I've seen dozens of worse cases than this, which survived, and nothing about his injuries suggested that he'd sustained a fatal wound. In the meantime, he was transferred to the ICU and transfused 2 units of blood when his post-surgery crit came back. 2C. He was stable and not on any pressors, and it seemed pretty routine. About 3 hours after he arrived, we were swarmed by law enforcement officers, and pretty much everyone except the attendant and a few nurses was kicked out of the ICU, disallowing visiting hours, normally every odd hour, 1 a.m., 3 a.m., etc., which is not something we do routinely. It was weird as hell. At turnover that morning, we were instructed not to round on the VIP that came in last night. That's exactly what the attending said, and no one except for me and another resident had any idea who he was talking about. No one here was allowed to see Seth except for my attending when he died. No coda was called. I rounded on patients literally next door, but was physically blocked from checking on him. I've never seen anything like it before, and while I can't say 100% that he was allowed to die, I don't understand why he was treated like that. Take it how you may. I'm just one low-level doc. Something's fishy, though. That's for sure. Can I verify that that's absolutely accurate and true? No. And you need both. But that's been posted by an anonymous doctor. All right, one last break and then back to Ray McGovern. Stand by. This is Ark Midnight.
An arc of rational thought traveling through the void of vacuous content and opinion. Ark Midnight with John B. Wells. Once again, here is John B.
All right, Mr. McGovern, sir, would you mind awfully just picking up where you left off, and let's keep this thing rolling?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, I'm glad you updated people on Seth Rich. A person who said he was an intermediary between Seth and WikiLeaks is going to be making public statements early this coming week. It looks very damning for those who did Seth Rich in. And the question will be how long the New York Times and the Washington Post will be able to avoid this story. It's a scandal as to how they've avoided it since. I believe that they're not going to be able to avoid it much longer. Now, what I was saying here, and I know we only have a little bit more time, is so illustrative of the corruption of the mainstream press, and this goes back to 1985, 1986, that it's worth telling. I mentioned Bob Perry. I mentioned that he revealed the Iran-Contra scandal. He actually pointed out Ali North as being one of the key players, won all kinds of awards for it. And here he is, hired away from AP, Associated Press. He's down in Washington now working for Newsweek. He's sort of the man of the hour, right? Okay, so they say to him, hey, the head of Newsweek says, Bob, we're having corporate come down from New York. We're having a little soiree. We like to do this, just a few people at my place, and you're invited. And Bob said, oh, that's great, and he's not really all that wise to the ways of Washington, but it sounds like a big deal. So he puts a tie on, he goes, and oh, wow, 12 people there. A young congressman from Wyoming, what's his name? Oh, Dick Cheney was his name, and Brent Scowcroft, who had just stepped down from being the national security advisor to Reagan, and lots of other people, and so over the shrimp cocktail, Brent Scowcroft says, unannounced or not asked, he just says, my successor, Admiral Poindexter, he's got to testify before Congress on Tuesday, and if you asked me, I would tell him to say that we never told the president anything about Iran-Contra. Now, of course, the big deal there is whether President Reagan was aware of all these illegal things. Okay, so his Scowcroft, I'd tell him we never told the president anything. So Bob Perry, unwise to the ways of Washington, at least with the 1%, he drops his fork. It bounces off his shrimp cocktail. Everybody looks at him, and without thinking, he says, General Scowcroft, do I understand that you would suggest that your successor commit perjury? No. There was a pregnant silence, as Bob describes it, for about, it seemed like 5 minutes, right? But it was probably for about 30 seconds. And then finally, the head of Newsweek, who was sitting right next to Bob, put his arm around Bob and said, now, Bob, sometimes you have to do what's best for the country. And then there's all this gentlemanly laughter. All males anyway, were the gentlemen. And so, there it was. We know what's best for the country, and we will let the country know what we think is best for them. So if it means lying under oath to Congress to cover up the president, that's what we'll do. After all, we know what's best. We're the 1%. And the next best example of that, if I have just one more minute, is back in 2004 when the New York Times ace reporter, investigative reporter, James Risen, uncovered the fact that George Bush and Dick Cheney had the NSA snooping on all our emails and telephone calls. Risen had that story 4 months before the November re-election of Bush. He went to his betters, or his supervisors at the New York Times, and what story? I said, well, no, that wouldn't, hold on to that. Hold on to that. We don't like to have stories right before the election. He said, do it before the election. We got 4 months. No, just sit on it. He sat on it. The New York Times sat on it. Bush became reelected, and it wasn't until December of the following year, 2005, James Ricin goes to his supervisor and says, this is going to be a little embarrassing, but the book I've done on how the CIA and NSA are snooping on all the things, well, it's in Galley, and it's going to come out, and you're paying me big bucks to be a reporter for New York, so maybe you ought to run an article on it. So Sulzberger and the Washington bureau chief go to the White House. They're in the Oval Office, and they say to President Bush, we're sorry, but we're not going to have. We can't stop this story any longer. The book's coming out, and so within the next week, we're going to have to write a story on this. It'll be big news, but we're sorry, but. And Bush says, you can't do that. You can't do it. National security. And Sulzberger virtually cries. He said, now, look, we held off for 15, 16 months. You got to understand our predicament. He's our guy. He's writing a book. Oh, we got to. So Bush said, I don't agree. Well, they walked out of there. 10 days later, New York Times, 15th of December, 2005, breaks the story. Now, if that story had run when it should have run 15 months before, we wouldn't have had to do 4 more years with Bush. So why the New York Times do that? Because they know what's best for the country, right? And I just have to finish this segment by saying that, I think back on what my Irish grandmother told me about the 1%. In those days, she called it the upper crust. She said, Raymond, I was going out to work on a golf course, right? It's going to be caddying. So you're going to be working with the upper crust. You know what they are? I said, oh, sure. You don't know. Now sit down and I'll tell you. So she said, the upper crust is a bunch of crumbs held together by a lot of dough. That was not only artfully stated, but, man, that equipped me to deal with those folks. And I still deal with them. I dealt with them when I was 27 years in the CIA. They're all around town here in Washington. I know what they are. A lot of them are crooks, and a lot of them are not exposed because of what the media, the condition that the mainstream media has descended into. That's why I enjoy talking on a program like yours, John B., or other people who will let me ramble on like this, because I do have a lot to say, and I don't say it for any other purpose than trying to spread some truth around.
Ray, let me ask you something. What happened to make you want to go out and start talking about this stuff?
Well, people ask me, they say, when did you fall off your horse on the way to Damascus, or what turned you? I always disappoint them, John B., because it was a straight line. This is hard to believe, but in the analysis part of the agency, as distinguished from the operations guys, that we were paid to tell the truth. We had career protection for telling the president what we thought the case was without fear or favor. We told it like it was. Now, this didn't always happen that way, because sometimes our betters would massage the things. But as a rule, we're able to tell Lyndon Johnson, for example. So he wants to bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail because the Air Force generals had told him that's the way to make Ho Chi Minh lose, right? So he said, what do you fellows think? And so we wait a decent interval of 2 days. We go back and say, now, Mr. President, the Ho Chi Minh Trail is not, like the 5 in California or I-66 or I-95. You can't even see it from the air. Most of it is under canopy. And besides, it's not white. There are 161 Ho Chi Minh Trails. And, even if you bomb the hell out of Mr. President, we know Ho Chi Minh. He's not going to give up. Matter of fact, very few cases in history involve people giving up just under bombing. Now, did we please the generals? The generals were after our rear ends. They went to our supervisors and said, why are you telling the president we can't use these big B-52s? We got great big bombs. And my supervisor said, we think McGovern and his friends are right. Now, I had that kind of career protection for telling the truth. What happened? Well, when Bill Casey came in, and then Bobby Gates, who incidentally worked for me for a while, that's Robert Gates, who was the defense secretary, they pretty much politicized the analysis group as well as the operations guys, and that takes about a generation to promote people on the basis of telling it like you think you want to tell the president rather than the way it is. And so we're talking 81. So fast forward to 2002, when the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Bob Graham from Florida, says, hey, you want us to vote on a war against Iraq about weapons of mass destruction, but you have no national intelligence estimate on weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So, well, are you going to do one? And George Tenet, the head of the CIA, said, no, we're too busy. He said, wait a second, you got to do one. Long story short, George Tenet goes back to his to Langley, to headquarters, and he's got this group around there. And I've been several hours in that days in that director's conference room, and he said, okay, now we have to do an estimate. We've been avoiding it because the evidence is pretty poor, but now we have to say what Dick Cheney has said, that there are weapons of mass destruction, and they're just about to get a nuclear weapon. Now, in our day, we say back in the day, all right, if a director of Central Intelligence told us that way, George, you're kidding, right? You're kidding. And if he said he wasn't kidding, that we had to construct an estimate for political purposes, we would have been the hell out of that room. Maybe there'd be one or two sycophants that would stay, but he would know. He would have known that he had a major problem on his hands, because we were not going to sit still for that kind of stuff. Now, what's my point? It takes a generation to politicize and corrupt analysts, starting 81 when Bobby Gates and Bill Casey started to corrupt the analysts. Well, you got 21, 22 years. You got a bunch of yes men around that table. And say, yes, sir, we can do it. How soon? 1 week. We've got to do it in 1 week. Oh, sure, we can do that. And so the very worst national intelligence estimate ever in the history of intelligence was prepared, wrong on all major counts, fed to Secretary Powell. You know the rest of the story. So we embarked on a war of aggression on the base not of mistaken intelligence, but on the basis of fraudulent intelligence. Now, my friends and I, as we looked, most of us in retirement at the time said, man, we have to form a little group to ride herd on our former colleagues, to expose their fraudulent activity and try to get through to the American people what's really going on here. And so we did form Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Our first memo to the president was written on the afternoon of the day that Colin Powell spoke before the UN. We're very, very proud of our record. We're not happy that we happened to be right about Iraq, but we're proud of having told the truth. So it was a straight line. And what changed was not McGovern and his honest colleagues. What changed was the agency under the impact of Robert Gates, head of analysis, and Bill Casey, who saw a commie under every rock in Nicaragua or wherever else in the world. It was a very sad situation, and we've been at it now for 14 years. I wish that the mainstream media would listen to what we say, but we've been sort of ostracized, and unless you look on the web, consortiumnews.com or raymcgovern.com, or there are a couple other sites as well. If you don't get those, and you don't get it, and you're misled by the propaganda, such as we've been discussing today about how the Russians gave the presidency to Donald Trump.
You know, Ray, I know you don't know. Everybody hopes that you do, and that just this once you'll just go blah. There it is. But where do you see us in another 5 years, or on any kind of a reasonable timeline? Can this nonsense be reversed, or is it so systemic, so endemic, so stuck on us that we're just going to have to ride the runaway mine car all the way to the end of the rails, right? Smash.
Yeah. Well, John B., I hate to say this, but I spent 5 years living in Germany. I had all manner of opportunity to ask Germans, young and old, how it could possibly be that the most highly educated, the most cultivated people in Europe let what happened in the 30s in Germany. I never got a satisfactory answer to that, but I do know that the institutions fell apart, including the churches, including the military, the judiciary, everything else. Fascism, what it became called, and we're pretty much close to that now. What the Germans did was they couldn't find their voice. They kind of thought, well, it'll get better. And besides, they're only taking away the gypsies and the homosexuals, and but then they came for everybody, right? Now we're at that stage now, in my view. We have to put our bodies into it. We have to say in a very tangible way, we're not going to go down this path. That's what it's going to take. I just stood trial in Syracuse for some demonstrating before the drone air base there. Drone killings are the most cowardly way to exterminate people on the other side of the globe. We have to stand up for these things. And if we get arrested, well, right now they don't put us in Guantanamo. But if we don't exercise our rights under the First Amendment now, they're going to expire just like some of the other rights that we have enjoyed traditionally. So it's time for winter soldiers. I appeal for people who have the guts to stand up, to find some way to demonstrate, not by words only, but putting their bodies into it.
That's about all the sage advice that's out there. I mean, seriously, that we can use, and you just let us have it. I really appreciate it, Ray. This is it's always an extraordinary pleasure to speak with you. And anybody else who wants to contact us at Caravan to Midnight and have a non-terrestrial kind of chat and keep it there inside the Caravan families because they've got stuff to say that they can't just blow out all over the public airwaves, I'd be delighted to talk to them. So you stay healthy. And how I wish you were my brother who lived down the block there. I could go over and talk to you all the time,
well, thanks, John B. It's a pleasure have this time with you.
All right. God bless you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
You too. Ray McGovern, everybody. Well, thanks to our guest, Ray McGovern. And thanks to you, Ark Riders, for being with us tonight. And thank you, Caravanners of CaravanToMidnight.com, for quite literally making this program possible. So, for Mr. Ghost, Chief Carson, K2, Olas the Man, Ms. B, and me, John B. Exercise caution in your daily affairs. Sharpen your critical thinking skills. Keep your eyes up always. And make ready for what's to come. Talk to you next Saturday night. It'll be the same drill. It'll be, it'll be some good talk, a few good tunes, and a good time. And don't forget about what we talked about. Please like us on the Facebook page, which is just John B. Wells, CTM. And, well, it's John B. Wells. And the CTM goes along with it. And then you follow me on Twitter at John B. Wells, CTM. I should have been a doctor. My writing skills are precisely like a doctor's. It's amazing. The only people who can read it are pharmacists. How do they do that? All right. It looks like it's about that time. All right. Kick the tires and light those electromagnetines. God bless everybody. Ark Midnight.